What's up? Welcome to a new episode of our new Schmovie weekly bonus content series kind of thing that we're doing here on the YouTube called Marvel Schmarvel. My name's Steve, and I'm here as always with
Ron
and John.
And we're going to be talking today, kind of recapping season one, the season. I don't know exactly where we're going to end up with WandaVision, but I mean the season finale of the first season of WandaVision, which aired this past Friday, and seems people have a lot of opinions on it, and I'm sure all of us do as well. So we're going to jump into this episode and kind of go over the season as a whole, I guess, just general thoughts, but kind of get more into the finale and kind of how it ended up, how it played out, how we thought it was going to go, and expectations versus reality seems to be a big theme of the recourse or the discourse of this episode airing. So what do you guys think? I guess, do we want to the finale in general, the episode itself, and then the season as a whole, kind of go back to it? What do you think?
Well, I want to say that too, but I also want to address our poll from last time, because I feel like that was a sort of plot spoilery kind of poll. So let's find out what people thought. Because you're talking about expectations, Steve. I do think I've seen a lot of people with expectations. I've seen new theories every week, and it made me want to ask you guys, do you theorize? I don't really theorize. I mean, I like look at what evidence we've been given, and I build my own little idea of where a show might be going. And I sometimes think what I had in my head was cooler than what a show did, or I'm surprised or happy they did something different from what I expected them to do. But in general, I don't sit there coming up with what I would call my pet theories. Like, I don't sit there developing, this is what I think is going to happen, and oh my God, look, there's more proof of it. Because it seems like inevitably those theories are based around some little background clue or something that happened in one of the movies from 5 years ago, or something that's like, I don't know that that's how they lay these stories out. I think they might call back to small details, but when they do, I think they put a lampshade on it so that you know what they're doing. I don't think Marvel does a lot of things well, but they're not subtle. So I kind of feel like when people are theorizing as of episode 8 of a 9-episode show about something crazy that's going to happen in the next hour, if it sounds like something that hasn't been set up, I'm sort of like, I just don't know if that's going to happen. Right. So I don't know. Where do you guys stand with that kind of stuff? Is that how you receive this stuff? Do you constantly build your own idea of how it should go in your head?
I'd say that I think you're absolutely right. Like, Marvel plays within the sandbox. They tell you what's in the sandbox, and then whatever happens within that sandbox happens with those characters, whatever parts are in there already. So I think you're absolutely right, and they've done this to us several times. It's not like this is like a reach for any new concept. I think that what has made people forget that in the beginning, Iron Man is incredibly popular now, but he wasn't when the first movie came around. So they use their resources and then they make them incredibly popular. So no one was screaming about Scarlet Witch at any point. Do you remember this? Do you remember, Steve, John? They made this character incredibly popular, Vision and all these characters. So they play within that sandbox. And I think that's really cool. And to act like that's some sort of disappointment now at this point is a little dismissive of the magic that they're kind of creating. They're making you love characters that are lesser known for, it might be for money reasons, whether in the background, like they don't want to use a character that a huge character that may cost a little more to acquire or something like that. They work within the sandbox. I think that's a feat within itself that needs to be applauded. So I don't know. I'm happy with it, honestly.
I think in general, like, to John's question, like this season specifically, even on one of these episodes, or maybe it was on our main podcast, I kind of was saying, like, I was kind of just rolling with this series. Like, I wasn't trying to get caught up in the, who is who and like what is the Evan Peters of it all, like any of that stuff. Like, we talked about it on the show, and like you can't help but think about it. So is it maybe like a 20% of me is thinking about things like that, like big picture kind of MCU things, like what does this mean? But for the most part with the show, like I was absolutely just going episode by episode, picking up on this story, kind of like you're saying, Ronald, like this is what we're being told, this is what I'm seeing that exists. And even going back to the MCU films, I mean, because we get flashbacks in episode 8 about the character, and I just think that like it served me better to not try to make all these theories. Like, even I keep mentioning watching it with my wife and like my friends that live across the country. We've been kind of watching it every Friday night together, and I've slowly seen them kind of fall off of the show. And part of that, I think, is being a victim of like the expectation of like these theories that everybody's throwing out on the internet, and even, sharing with one another in some cases. But I think in general, like it really kind of made it better for me as a season as a whole to try to not really engage too heavily in that, at least in terms of like what I wanted the show to be. I try to keep those separate. Like, I don't really have an idea of what I want this show to be. I just want to watch the show that they made. And, if it ends up being one of these crazy things, like that would be cool. But I mean, it really didn't become that or really didn't go into that second level until you really saw the whole Evan Peters of it all show up.
Right.
And
this show is such a mystery from the start.
And I just think his presence really kind of like just set those theories and those like grand expectations like exponentially off into the future of the rest of the season. And if anything, that hurts it, but not at the show's fault. Like it's just us as viewers like have become so accustomed that like wanting something to be what we want it to be instead of like what they made. And I try to stay away from that as much as possible.
I mean, but the show, like I think the first few episodes, that was the big one. That was the one where we all said, oh my God, what does this mean? But every episode before that had some moment that was like, oh, cool. Like the first episode just staying in sitcom world for the most of it and then showing you the little glimmer of what's happening was like, ooh, what's happening? And then the second one, it got more and more. I do think after that, people started thinking every week they were going to get like a cameo from a major character or Professor Xavier or something that answered these big questions. But we kind of alluded to this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about what we expected them to do for the rest of the season. And we were saying like, if Agatha was sort of the bad guy, and then you've got Sword and Hayward as kind of a soft other bad guy, and then you've got Scarlet Witch as kind of a bad guy, that stuff getting resolved was enough. That anybody else coming in, whether it was Mephisto or whether it was something crazy, it just didn't seem like what they would do unless their plan was to end this series on a cliffhanger note and set up a second season. But I think what we predicted, to the extent that we predicted, was no, they're going to deal with the emotional fallout of what Wanda's been going through, and that's what this show is, and that is what this show ultimately became. We've all kind of alluded to it. I really thought this last episode was pretty darn satisfying. There was like one thing that bugged me about it that we'll get to, but I was pretty satisfied with it. I think because I knew it was just going to pick up the pieces of what we'd seen, and it was going to resolve it. And then I also expected there's going to be some action. And I thought the action in this episode was just comic booky and mind-blowing and weird. There were a couple of moments where I was like, oh my God, what am I looking at? Two robot men fighting in a library? I'm looking at like two witches against a red sky. It's that kind of surreal comic booky stuff that I like that they got some of that into the show. But I understand why all that fireworks was pretty much saved for the last episode.
Go ahead, sir.
I was going to say, so the poll, did you pull that result up while you were?
Oh, yeah. Pull the, the question was, Paul Bettany was quoting and said, there is one character that has not been revealed that is very exciting. It's an actor I've longed to work with for all of my life. And then we asked, who do you think that it could be? So we had Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Paul Bettany, and then other. And we have 43% for Paul Bettany, 12% for Ian McKellen, who's Magneto. Patrick Stewart is 12.5%, and then other 31.3%. So people kind of figure Paul Bettany would be the guy, and he was the guy.
he was being cute, wasn't he?
Yeah. If you watch back that quote, man, you could tell that he's kind of being a little cheeky. You know, it's like
I love it.
Tell that, so yeah, he was a surprise and sort of the catalyst for some of the cooler parts of this episode were the White Vision and
someone said we've got to come up with a better name for him, and I agree. White Vision sounds like some Proud Boys shit. We should call him. Someone suggested Revision.
I like Revision.
That was pretty cool. So.
I like Revision.
But we call him White Vision if that's what fits. Whitey. We call him
Whitey Vision. What do you think about the conflict between those two guys?
Steve?
I don't know. I think I actually thought that was probably the weaker stuff for me of the episode. I think just kind of popping that up at the end of the last one and, it kind of being over and done with within like 2 minutes, like, or, like, and then he's gone. I mean, I'm sure that's a factor that will come back into play elsewhere. I think the best that serves is really what it does for Vision, like what it allows him to realize of what White Vision is and what maybe opportunity that character, that sentient being has, like in terms of the memories and everything. I really like that stuff. But I think if anything, it served just more purpose for the proper Vision, like the Vision that we know and love. And I think it's just like the conflict between them in the fighting, like honestly, like that part of the episode kind of gets that gummy CGI stuff for me a little bit. Like it kind of gets that, that just like CGI showdown, it kind of follows the same mold that most people criticize about any of the comic book movies, is that like you have that massive fight and it's just like everything's flying around, which looks cool. And it is kind of bonkers to think like that is in some ways straight from a comic panel when you're watching it on your screen. Like that's really cool in some ways. But I think just for the purpose of the story of the season, the narrative of the season, I don't know that the motivation, like Hayward's motivation and White Vision, and like really maybe was, we talked about it last episode, like kind of spread out better throughout the season. Like I feel like that was one of the main things that I thought was really a little too much too late, like kind of dumping it at the end of episode 8 and, having it come up as, like I said, like literally like a couple minutes of this episode. So that stuff really didn't probably work as well for me. I did really like all the Agatha and Wanda, like the fight, like the whole ruin thing at the end, like, where she was able to only use her powers. Like I thought that kind of came back around and played out pretty well. And I think the biggest takeaway, like from the whole season, is just that, and I was talking to Aaron about this earlier, because like she was kind of cold on the season as a whole. Like she didn't really like the show. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that it really did take a character that some people really, really loved, like, and I didn't really have much of a connection to, and did make both of them like way more interesting, especially her as Scarlet Witch and like what she does, in the future of the MCU. But like the stuff with, that those last like few minutes, like when she's home with the kids and with Vision, like that stuff I thought worked really well.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of like, you have that like recurring like sadness for these characters, and it's really kind of hard to stomach at times. And them together in the living room and like what they say to each other before the hex kind of collapses on it, really just is some of the most moving stuff in the MCU, I think. I mean, it really is earned. And like the fact that you get this over 9 episodes, as opposed to you seeing somebody like these two characters for like 10 minutes over the course of a Avengers movie, you really do get to flesh that out. And when that hits in that final 10 minutes, for me, it hit hard. Like I was like tearing up. Like I thought it was really, really emotionally sad. And I felt for her so much. But yeah, I mean, overall, like I really did think it was a really strong season. I really like what they did with the characters and really kind of what they've invested in the Scarlet Witch as a character that maybe was a secondary or tertiary character in the whole phase 1, 2, 3 of MCU. And like, now you can see this character becoming a character that is like a major character in the next phases of the MCU. And I would love to see that, because I think it's earned now. And I would love to see what she looks like in the future of the films and the TV shows.
Yeah. I think that one of the more powerful things about this season in general is sort of the commentary on grief and
absolutely
the stages of it. There were parts where we've all mourned our past, our, someone that we've lost. And, I think about when Monica Rambeau kind of tried to take her out of this haze that she was in this kind of visceral reaction that you have to somebody kind of being like, are you okay? Are you, this that you're in is kind of you're out of sorts right now.
Yeah.
And having a friend that cares enough to check you, and seeing, Monica, who saw mourning her mom through the lens of, Wanda, and seeing how she's mourning the loss of Vision in her life that she knew. And that is some of the most powerful things that I remember about comic books. There's this comic that I was really kind of obsessed with a couple years ago, The Superior Spider-Man, where Doc Ock occupies Spider-Man's body, and he's fighting a guy, right? And he punches his jaw off his body. Then he realizes that Spider-Man's kind of been holding back his whole life.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that before, Ronald. That moment where you realize, and Doc Ock realizes what a good person Peter Parker has been this whole time.
He's like, okay, so like he's been balancing all of this his whole life. And to see, you hear about the loss that Wanda's had, but seeing it play out and seeing how it affects people and what she could do with her power. She could demolish people. She could destroy the world. But instead of that, she just created a hub where she can mourn. Like, that is deep, man. That's really deep. So, like, I don't know. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I think that I probably agree with you guys in general about everything you said. The one thing I think I preferred the Vision stuff to the Witch stuff in terms of the resolution. But some of my favorite stuff in the MCU is the heady conversations that the Vision tries to have. Like, I love at the end of Age of Ultron where it's just him and the last Ultron robot, and they have this little exchange about humankind. It's like, and the Vision has got this attitude about humankind. He stands outside of it, but he kind of admires it, And in this show, they dealt so much with like, what's the nature of the Vision's existence? So I love that when Vision fights Vision, those two guys are going to sock each other a bunch, but then there's going to come a point where they're both going, wait a minute, what are you exactly? And how are you like me? And it's like, well, hold on a second. Yeah. I love that idea. And I think what you said, Steve, about what this unlocks in Revision's head, that now he's out there, he's not Vision, but he does have Vision's memories, and he seems to have the power set of the Vision. So there's but I like that he just kind of left, and it's like, oh, he's out there. We'll see him again. But I think that, like, to me, that the way that culminated in that final scene in the living room you're talking about, Steve, with Vision really asking, I mean, it's almost like he's not childlike. He's a man. He's mature. Yeah. But the philosophical question he asks, the vulnerability of him saying, before I go, I must know, what am I? And then she says, well, whatever she explains to him, that, you're the part of the Mind Stone and you're my love and all that stuff. And then I have it written down here. He says, I've been a voice with no body, referring to Jarvis, a body but not human, referring to Vision, and now a memory made real, referring to the WandaVision version of Vision. And he says, who knows what I might be next? I fucking love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love that character. And I love his exploration of his being and his identity, and the fact that there's some new version of him out there that's not him. I love, and I think, ending on that note of like, well, we're going to say hello again because we've said goodbye before and we keep seeing each other. So it's like, to me, that's beautiful. And I agree 100%, Steve, that it's one of, if someone were to say most moving moments thus far in these movies, it would be in my top 3 or 5 or something,
definitely.
Easily, because of how earned it feels after this show. I will concede, as cool as I think the comic booky action is, I wish the Marvel standard for mocap and CGI were just like one notch higher, because it does end up looking, I think, cool, but very rubbery, very video gamey at times. It's okay for me when it's the Vision fighting the Vision. It's a little bit okay because they're like phasing in and out of reality while they're fighting. And I appreciate the ingenuity of how those shots are staged, even if I think the effects could be a little bit better. But I do think what you're describing as that kind of checking out in some of those scenes, I do think that is I've come to accept the level of effects in the Marvel movies. I think they look like Marvel effects, and they look pretty cool to me a lot of the time. But when you think about, like, is this as good as it could possibly be when it comes to CGI? It's not close,
Nowhere near.
And I think maybe they're letting it look a little heightened. But I'm not making excuses for it. I think that is sort of a weakness of a lot of the MCU. We said it about Black Panther, in fact, that some of those fight scenes were just pixels versus pixels. Yeah. And it really contrasts, just like with WandaVision, with the rest of the story that is so human. But yeah, I think it's cool where we left Wanda at the end. I think now saying she's a big part of Doctor Strange 2 could not make more sense. And as the final credits rolled, I was sort of glad we didn't get like the surprise cameo visit at the very end that made it seem like that's what this was leading up to. This was a story about these characters, and that's what it ended with. I did want to say one thing, though. The part that I thought was really lame was Hayward's resolution. I thought it was like him sitting in the car. It felt like they had Kat Dennings for half an afternoon, and she sat in a car, and they shot that shot. But the implication that he was like, oh, darn it, like stuck in that car until the cops came and got him, it just felt stupid. Like, I would rather him have like run out with a gun and acted crazy and got zapped into the vortex or something. It would have been cooler to see something happen to him instead of being like a Scooby-Doo villain kind of ending. I thought that was really half-baked and really did feel like they were trying to do that thing where you go, oh, you give everybody something to do, and they were like, what's Darcy going to do? Oh, she can be the one who stops Hayward, and then they'd never bothered to come up with it or shoot it, really. You know,
right.
I do think that, I totally agree with that. But I do think the resolution of like essentially Scarlet Witch still losing Vision was really very forward thinking for a Disney product.
Yeah,
it's still under the banner of Disney Plus. This, regardless of if it's a comic book movie, it ended sad as hell, and stuck the landing. And credits went by, and nobody got resurrected. It literally was just the saddest ending that you could possibly have, besides maybe Wanda dying too. It was so sad. I left in like, but also hopeful, But
I would say I think there's a big sense of hope.
Yeah,
like,
a lot of hope.
I think there's no way out. I think there's no way out of this story without a lot of sadness, because I mean, there's an inevitability that she's going to lose him again. And I mean, and we saw multiple teases of that throughout the season, of like him falling apart anytime this hex was not a factor.
Yeah, you said, Steve, how many times are we going to watch him die? Apparently a few more, because
right. It's just like, you know what's going to happen, but if it's going to happen again, make it really worth it and like well done. And I think they really did. Like that living room scene, like the line you read, John, like a memory, like that line is like, they've had some great lines on this season, like some great writing for this show. And I think if it's gonna retread that, I think it's do it in a different way that kind of has a different impact on the viewer and on her story, which it does, because this time it happens, she's ready for him to leave. Like she knows he has to go because he's not the Vision she knew. And I think that is the difference. And I think that's why she kind of leaves with hope and confidence and empowerment. And I think that stinger, or the two stingers that you get, I think the main one at the end, like seeing her really harnessing what she's now capable of, is like really encouraging and like really slick. And I that's what makes me excited to see more of her, because she does seem like one of, if not the most powerful people, in the MCU at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, cool. So I mean, that's kind of where we left the season.
So Evan Peters, just before we wrap up, what did you guys think of the idea that in this world he's an actor named Ralph Boner?
I love that, man.
I think it's like a massive troll.
Yes,
they completely got the MCU audience.
Well, I even said at one point, is he just an actor in this world? Does she know him as an actor? But then I was like, well, how could there be an X-Men movie? So my thinking fell apart there, but it didn't occur to me that they would just say, oh, it's just a coincidence for you, the viewer, that the actor that got sucked into this role in this town happens to be bear a resemblance to your universe's Evan Peters, who starred as Quicksilver. Yeah. But no, I think it's a very funny, clever troll, because I thought Evan Peters was hilarious in those scenes where he's like,
I love him.
This is my man. I mean, he was just such a lame douche. It was just a funny way for that to go. But I guess Quicksilver, his version of Quicksilver, has kind of been that way anyway. But Ralph Boner, that was just a funny. I mean, you're right though. For people expecting this is the rift that proves the X-Men are coming, it's like we said though, it feels like they're going to want to recast all those things. So why would they bring those things? So yes, it was important to them to troll us though, which to me makes it a joke, and I think that's well within their bounds.
They got it for sure.
It definitely, it's the best troll that you could possibly do, and also a hint that this world is going to open up. Yes. I think that's the best possible scenario. Because look,
great way to put it.
If they acquired the X-Men just now, why the fuck would they do this? Marvel is very intentional. They want
you're right.
Make sure that this rolls out the way that they want it to roll out, and they wouldn't have a flash in the pan sort of thing just to appease a couple people. So
have you heard the news about that? That Kevin Feige is developing and producing a movie called The Mutants right now. That's like the inside rumor.
Yeah.
Which to me feels like a great way to say we're going to do mutants, but we're not jumping in yet and saying it's X-Men or it's Wolverine or whatever. And that title might change, but if they stick with it, I think The Mutants feels really good alongside some of their other titles they've had, like the Eternals or whatever that's coming. Like it feels like it's owning up to the idea that mutants are sort of a new class of hero, that we haven't yet seen that version of the characters in this universe, which is to say people with some kind of genetic mutation that just manifests one day. I think pretty much everyone in the Marvel universe, we know why they have their power. It's there's some reason for it.
So. Other thing, I don't know if I love the title, but Like I feel like it feels a little too tight, like with like New Mutants.
Well, that's why I'm saying it feels a little like that, like a working title. Like it feels a little generic. But I'm just saying, showing where their head's at in terms of what they're doing. The idea that we're going to work to introduce this idea of what these characters can be, more so than saying we're setting up Dark Phoenix or we're setting up, whatever storyline people think they know already. I hope they do something new. Do you want to see all new, or do you want to see some of the actors that we already know in those roles?
I wouldn't mind seeing some of the old actors. I mean, I'm okay with recasting. I think that this is a cool opportunity to cast a really cool Wolverine that kind of is a little different from the one that we've known for decades at this point.
There was rumors out there that before it all went to shit, I think that the top person they were going after was Shia LaBeouf.
See, I think people would hate that.
Like you're trolling me right
I think
now,
he would
Steve.
probably be pretty good. I feel like he would probably be pretty good. I think people would hate that, and it would have such a bad reaction from people that it would almost not be worth it. But I think in the end, he would probably be okay in that role because I think he's got the right.
His ass off.
I think it was like that. One of the scoopers that I listened to his podcast, it was that, and then it went from that to like maybe he was going to be involved in like as like the Thing. In a Fantastic Four movie, but I guess they were trying to find they wanted him in the MCU somewhere, and I think that everything happening with him and his career and his personal life, I think, kind of has changed all that. But I just think like the like how intricate they are going to be with these properties. It's like you can't overstate it because they are like unquestionably the next standard of the MCU. Like the fact that they have the X-Men, the fact that they have Fantastic Four, like that is the future right now. Like we have the characters that we love. We've gotten more Scarlet Witch and we have her new place among everything. And, the characters that we've seen through all the 25 movies already, or whatever it's been, 25 years. No, 25 movies?
25 movies.
Movies. Like, what am I talking about? 25 movies. But I mean, like, that is the future. I mean, like those are the characters that are really going to anchor this and take it into the next decade or two. Like it's got to be the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. And then, you kind of start stepping back and pulling back more Avengers things. And then it just opens up like with no expiration date. You know what I mean? Like it could go forever. The fact that they could play with all these characters is just completely astounding now. And, and they'll do it. They'll do it right. I have no doubt.
Well, Steve, you're right. And also, Ronald, what you said about Iron Man. They did it with Iron Man. You don't think they can do it with fucking Wolverine?
Right.
Like if I mean, assuming they don't cast someone who turns out to be a shitheel, like in between the movie and the release or something, like it's just like the X-Men. A lot of people think they kind of botched it. A lot of people like those movies, but the characters are out there. The names are out there. Magneto means something to people. Professor X means something to people. It's like that's like not quite Spider-Man, but it's in that neighborhood of like this is a known quantity. You don't have to introduce people to Wolverine. You can just say, "Here's the new Wolverine," just like you can say, "Here's the new Batman." As much as I would love to see Hugh Jackman in these movies because I think he'd be great. I love his send-off. I love how final that was.
Perfect.
So maybe they should save him for some multiverse storyline down the road that's within the X-Men universe, not a Marvel event, but just like a Wolverine character moment. But for now, I would love to see something brand new. And same with Patrick Stewart. I love him to death. I think there's no one better for that role, but they'll have to figure someone out because
I say just recast it all.
Yeah, newness
I
is the
love
way
a
to go.
whole new cast.
Wipe it clean. Okay.
Wipe it clean. Let's see what Feige and company do. And I mean, they've done amazing casting with the MCU to this point, and I would love to see who they find for those kinds of roles because it could be something new and different, and not who we see these characters as already. So I'd be really on board for that.
Yeah. It's pretty exciting. I mean, we've never really seen a good saga with like Wolverine and Sabretooth. We've never seen
not like a sustained saga. Sustained
good, like his arch enemy, like somebody that is a thorn in his ass and reappears and over and over again in his life. Like I think things like that we could see fleshed out in the MCU. I wanted to ask you guys a question. So, how do you feel about the fallout? To circle back to WandaVision, how do you feel about the fallout with Wanda and Agatha Harkness?
It feels like they created Wanda's con, sort of like here's this character who could be an antagonist to her, who she has under her thumb, who's kind of imprisoned, but Agatha can escape. Or she can need Agatha's help. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the next time we see Wanda at some point she says, I know someone who might know, and then they go visit Agatha in Westview. I mean, that's now part of the MCU. I think that's one of the coolest things they did too, was leaving that character in a kind of Twilight Zone, ironic punishment kind of hell.
Yeah.
But that still leaves Catherine Hahn on the board, because by the time that episode was over, I mean, she's among the she's at least in the top half of Marvel villains in terms of having a character and a point of view and like something going on with her character that made sense within the story. I still think her plot of just waiting all this, like, it makes the season feel kind of weird when you look back on what was actually happening. But I'm glad we have her, and I thought her sort of moment of realizing she was going to lose. That's always when you know if you have a halfway decent villain. If you sort of feel halfway bad for them when they go no, you know. And Catherine Hahn had a moment where I was like, oh shit, Agatha just realized that it's not going to go her way, and she played like a human moment of like weakness, you know. And I think that's a sign. Anyway, I thought that was cool. What do you think, Steve, of the Agatha of it all?
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, I don't have anything new to add to it. I think that like the dependency that she was having on Wanda, like to kind of see how the extent of her powers and like to really pull them out, and what she kind of was doing to lure her to like heighten the power, you know, to kind of really get her to the ultimate level that she was like basically trying to take all from her. I thought that was all pretty cool. And I really liked the, you know, the kind of the, you know, like the switch there in that fight that they had, like where like you could see her like missing her, and Agatha having that notion of like, that's weird, like she just missed, like where'd that power shot go to the, you know what I mean, like when it was hitting the wall of the hex, like she like was kind of like, that's weird. And then eventually you kind of see what's happening. But I thought that was kind of cool, you know, kind of like turn the page on her a little bit. But I too really like the fact that she's going to be there. I like the fact that she's just there in Westview, and not Westview under a hex, just like a person in Westview. She could be somewhere in the world even by the next time we see her, if she somehow gets outside of it. But she's just that neighbor now, which is kind of like, you know, the part she played to get what she wanted, and she ultimately, you know, didn't get it, and now she's stuck in that part. So I thought that all kind of came around nicely. But again, like Catherine Hahn a ton, and I would agree it's like one of the better villains in the MCU. So I'd like to see that character come back around, even as a resource maybe in the future, like you're saying, John.
Like a Hannibal Lecter kind of, she's the only one that can help me kind of thing. That's almost what they literally set up, you know, in her saying, there may come a day when I'll need you. We didn't really mention the kids, but I thought you were talking about the emotional honesty of it too. The saying goodnight to those kids for the last time was incredibly rough for me. But I think it's all part of what we were talking about before. It's leading up to the moment of Vision leaving. But they too were like sentient creations of Wanda's power. So like as sad as that was, it's one more clue to just what she can do, you know, which is they don't define it, but they define it enough, you know. Like I think the power, we've gotten to the point where the powers in these shows and movies, it's not very defined, but you get a sense of like the magic, like there are some limits to it, you know.
Right. I mean, that kind of contributes to the idea of mourning. You know, if you're mourning a person, if you're mourning the loss of your partner, if you had the ability to, your brain would project how things would be with this person. You'd have kids, you'd have a life, that is incredibly sad, man. Like, you know, but again, the fact that she can materialize these people, maybe she can do it again. And the kids were so likable. You know, we talk about kid actors kind of having the feelings about sometimes it being dodgy sort of acting. These kids were really likable throughout.
You know, they were solid. They fit the tone.
Yeah, they were solid. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen next. And speaking of next, Monica Rambeau, you know, kind of seeing the extent of some of her powers, dodging like bullets going through her, and you know, turning in a light or something like that. How you guys feel about Monica Rambeau and her evolution during the course of the show?
I kind of was a little off on Monica, to be honest with you. Like I was like, I feel like they kind of like let her go in the last like 3 episodes. And I like the character. I like to think about what she could do like in Captain Marvel 2 or whatever the plan is, you know, that stinger with the Skrull at the end. I think it makes me interested to see more about her. But I think, again, the criticism that we've said like mostly last week, it kind of really kind of came to a head. It was like, I wish it would have been like kind of doled out more. Like, like I wish they would have done a better job, because a lot of what works the best in like episodes, like was it like 2 through 5 or 3 through 6, is the Monica stuff. Like her coming out of the snap is like some of the best stuff of this season of the show. And like that whole thing was great. But I feel like they just kind of like, there's a bit of a off, like the balance was off. I think when it came to what to do with her, what to show her doing in this season, and for her to kind of like disappear with Pietro or the boner character for like an episode and a half was just like, that seemed like a waste to me, and so to have her pop up and have a bit of an impact in this big scene at the end of the season was cool. And yeah, it's kind of interesting to see like the extent of some of her powers. But I think I need to see more of the character. I like her. I like the actress who plays her, and I'd be very curious to see like what they do with her in the next Captain Marvel movie.
Yeah. I kind of agree 100%. I mean, it's like I liked her. I thought she was good. She, especially in the beginning, and then I think it was at that point where we started going, what's like the story? I really think that 6, 7, 8, the story got a little bogged down in its own, like shifting gears from this experimental sitcom thing to what the actual kind of Marvel action movie story part of it was going to be. And she felt like one of those. If this were a movie, you would come home saying, "Oh, she was cool, but she was kind of an underserved character," But I do think if all we're talking about is the ongoing soap opera of Marvel, and did they set up a cool character I want to see more of, and did they give her kind of an origin that I think is cool, then all that is a big yes. Like, yeah, Captain Marvel 2, bring it on. The stuff with like just the idea that she got mutated by this experience, and that's sort of a clue towards what might be happening with some of these other future characters. All of that feels good, but I think from a plot standpoint, it did feel like they revealed that she was just a secondary character they were setting up, but when they sort of sidelined her for that amount of time, like that was sort of their way of, whether they wanted to say it or not, of saying, yeah, we really don't intend to do that much with this character's arc. But you mentioned, Ronald, she had a significant moment of hearing Wanda's sort of apology at the end, and you see how Monica is thinking to herself, like, I'm just now learning about what happened to me. So I understand kind of what, like, I like that was allowed to be unspoken, as unsubtle as Marvel can be. That was a moment where we go, oh, some of what Wanda's saying about herself, Monica could say about herself too. And that is why we're understanding she gets the grief and the power part, So I think that I can't wait to see her again. And I think Captain Marvel 2 is one of those where I expect them to try to up the ante. I know a lot of people were lukewarm on that movie, which I enjoyed a lot of, but I just feel like that's one that everything I've heard about it sounds like they're going for something big and cool. So yeah, Monica, and she was Captain Marvel in the comics before Carol Danvers was ever called Captain Marvel. Monica Rambeau was called Captain Marvel. So I wonder what they're going to do with that, if they're even going to mention that name one time. They tend not to sometimes, but anything else that we need to wrap up? Jimmy Woo, he's great.
With Jimmy Woo, yeah.
Enough said.
Yeah, amazing.
I mean, I'd watch the show that's framed by him, I guess, would be my short way.
He's solid.
Yeah.
The stinger at the end with the Skrull. How do you feel about Skrull and the possibilities of who is calling her to the sky? Who do you think was calling her to the sky?
I think that to be Carol.
You think it's Carol?
It just seems like the thing that makes the most sense, because that actually is a friend of hers.
I think that like throughout the season we've heard Carol's voice before, like in those little, like she was like walking through the hex, you could like hear that character. So I mean, I think there's the presence and like the fact they keep mentioning her through the season, like they've mentioned her more than twice. It seems like it would be her. I'm agreeing there.
I think it's her or her mom, because I don't think her mom died of cancer. I think that's all a hoax. That's my theory. I
mean, it could be. I mean, that's the reason why I assume it's Carol, is because the mom's dead. But you're right that there could be more to that. But I don't think there's any other characters from that world
you're creating these internet theories now, Ronald. You're the one.
Well, no, but I mean, it's true.
Now I gotta fuck with Ronald. I gotta make it not happen now.
But it almost feels like they're leaving it open for themselves too. It's that kind of line to say it's a friend, and then we later find out it was her mom or it was Carol. But it does seem like if the mom is dead, it kind of makes sense that it's Carol, because she doesn't have an attachment necessarily to Nick Fury or to any of the other Skrulls that we do from that movie. So yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Cool.
So I guess we'll be back in a couple weeks when Winter Soldier comes out.
Next week we'll be off, and then the week after that we'll check out Falcon and Winter Soldier, see what that's all about.
Yeah,
it's exciting.
You can subscribe to the YouTube channel here, or if you're watching this on another social media site, track it back and subscribe. The podcast that we all put out weekly, that this is kind of an offshoot of, is called Schmovie, which you can find really on any podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or you can just go to movieschmovie.com. This is the link that we kind of like to share, is just pod.link/movieschmovie. So if you're not sure where you want to listen to us, you can always go there and listen right on that page to all of our episodes, or that page can take you to your podcast platform of choice. Like, there's links to all of them right from that page, and it shows you everywhere that we are available. If you do subscribe to that podcast, we would love it if you kind of leave a review or comment, or if you're watching this video on YouTube, comment, like it, subscribe, tell us what you thought about the final episode of Captain Marvel. And hi, Aaron. And let us know what you're looking forward to most with Scarlet Witch in the future. And also maybe, like, let's get excited about Falcon and Winter Soldier. Let's talk it up. Yeah. Do you guys have anything else you want to throw in real quick?
No, I think that's it.
That's all.
You good?
Yeah.
All right, guys. As always,
you're our Aunt May.
Yeah, you're our Aunt May.
You're our Aunt May. That's it. See you guys.
What?